Hi everyone. Today we're going to take a look at a story problem that includes a fraction pattern. And fraction pattern questions are really just adding or subtracting questions in disguise. It's kind of like they're trying to hide the fact that it's really just an adding or subtracting question. So let's take a look at an example so we can see what this might look like. This question reads, Jarrett's puppy weighed 3 and 3/4 ounces at birth. At 1 week old, the puppy weighed 5 and 1/6 ounces. At 2 weeks old, the puppy weighed 6 and 1/2 ounces. If the weight gain continues in this pattern, how much will the puppy weigh at 3 weeks old? So right away, I know that this particular question is about a puppy that's growing, and I can already figure that this particular puppy is getting heavier. The weight is increasing each week after it's born. So let's go line by line and get the math information out of this story problem. The first sentence reads, Jarrett's puppy weighs 3 and 3/4 ounces at birth. That tells me that when the puppy was born, he was pretty tiny. Then at 1 week old, the puppy weighed 5 and 1/6 ounces. At 2 weeks old, the puppy weighed 6 1/2 ounces. So I can see that the weight is increasing. Then the question sentence reads, if this weight gain continues in this pattern, how much will the puppy weigh at 3 weeks old? So a lot of times you're going to be given that word pattern right in there. And remember, like we said at the beginning, pattern questions are just adding or subtracting questions in disguise. So to tackle this, first, we would write the terms, which is another way of saying the numbers that we know, and leave blanks for the ones that we're trying to find. So I know from the story problem it's talking about the puppy's weight when it was born, at 1 week old, at 2 weeks old, and at 3 weeks old. I can fill in the first three of those blanks because I know when the puppy was born it weighed 3 and 3/4 ounces. At 1 week old it weighed 5 and 1/6 ounces, and at 2 weeks old it weighed 6 and 1/2 ounces. I'm trying to find that missing line for how much it weighed at 3 weeks old. Next, I need to find a rule for our sequence, or that list of numbers. And the rule has two parts. First, we need to decide if our numbers are getting bigger or smaller. And then we need to decide by how much, or what's the gap in between numbers. So I know right away that my rule is that my numbers are getting bigger. But it's kind of hard to tell by how much those numbers are increasing because I have different denominators in all three of my numbers. At birth, I have a denominator of 4. At 1 week old, my denominator is 6. And at 2 weeks old, the denominator is 2. So with fraction pattern questions, you may have to rewrite your mixed numbers or your fractions as equivalent fractions. So in other words, when I'm looking at the denominators 4, 6, and 2, I can tell that they will have a common denominator of 12. So I'm going to rewrite all of these fractions as fractions with a denominator of 12. That means at birth, I could say that Jarrett's puppy weighed 3 and 9/12 ounces. At 1 week old, the puppy was 5 and 2/12 ounces. And finally, at 2 weeks old, the puppy weighed 6 and 6/12 ounces. Now, to figure out my rule, I need to compare two of these numbers. I'm going to look at the difference between the puppy's weight at 1 week old and at 2 weeks old. Now, you could pick any two numbers that are right next to each other, but I picked these two because it will be pretty easy for me to figure this out in my head. Starting with the fractional part, I can see that I go from 2/12 to 6/12. That's an increase of 4/12. And then in my whole number part, I go from 5 to 6. That's an increase of one whole number. So that means my rule is going to be adding 1 and 4/12 ounces every time I jump up a week. So between 1 week old and 2 weeks old, the puppy gained 1 and 4/12 ounces. I would double check that that's my rule by checking the weight between when he was born and when the puppy was 1 week old. That gap is also 1 and 4/12 ounces. So finally, I need to extend that sequence and apply that rule to find the missing number. In this case, I only have to go one more step. So I will add 1 and 4/12 ounces to the 6 and 6/12 ounces the puppy weighed at 2 weeks old. 6 and 6/12 plus 1 and 4/12 is 7 and 10/12 ounces. So to answer this question, I could say that Jarrett's puppy would weigh 7 and 10/12 ounces. We could also rewrite this in simplest form and say that Jared's puppy would weigh 7 and 5/6 ounces if the question asked us to. So be on the lookout for these fraction pattern questions, but don't get thrown off by them because they're really just an adding or a subtracting question in disguise. I can't wait to do more of these practices with you. Have a great day and thanks for watching.